Okay, wow. Awesome panel. Thank you, everybody. And thanks, everybody, for listening. So we'll shift gears and we'll move into the next session of the Forest Service pathways and hiring authorities. That'll be given by the National Recruitment Team. And I believe, Thomas, you have the PowerPoint ready to
Yes.
go. Perfect, thank you. And our presenters will be Alejandro Fajardo and Jody Benavides.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to present today and the opportunity to listen to all y'all stories. That was a lot of great information, and I always value listening to each individual experience because it's all great information and information that folks that are trying to get into the agency need to hear and would really do well in hearing. So we can get started with our presentation today. The presentation we're going to do today is one that our National Strategic Recruitment Team puts on. And before I go forward, I can introduce myself. My name is Alejandro Fajardo. My start with the Forest Service was as a seasonal wildland firefighter. And then after that career was done, I transitioned into the human resources, specifically into recruitment, where I've been since as a national recruiter for, as you see here, the National Strategic Recruitment Team. And I want to bring on Jody Benavides. If you want to just turn on your camera and introduce yourself right quick. She is also a national recruiter that will be helping today.
Hi, everyone. Inamakima Heremba. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jody Benavides. I am an recruiter on the National Strategic Team, and I am also from the Isleta Pueblo here in New Mexico.
Awesome, thanks, Jody. And then Jody will be sharing some resources after our presentation is done that you guys can share with anybody that might find it useful. So during today's session, we'll discuss the pathways eligibility and other hiring eligibilities as well. I think it's important for folks to know the different eligibilities, or as it's known in USA Jobs, the hiring paths, and the difference between hiring eligibility and qualifications as well. So we can just go into the next slide. This is the the homepage for USA Jobs, and that's where you can access pretty much all the federal announcements that we have. The system is used by pretty much most agencies, and it allows applicants to have a specific period to apply and submit their applications if they wish to be considered for career opportunities with federal government, specifically the Forest Service. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so the USA Jobs basics. So USA Jobs, and I know most of you guys know, but there might not be some folks that are as familiar with USA Jobs. So USA Jobs is the federal government's main employment portal. It's mainly used by the executive branch agencies opposed to competitive civil service positions, such as positions for current federal employees, as well as limited accepted service positions, such as positions under the Pathways program, which we'll cover today. And most civil service hiring begins on this site. So, well, this is the site where you'll find opportunities and announcements, as well as where you begin your application submission. Your federal application is not complete until you actually go into the agency system. And to learn more about this, we recommend attending one of our webinars called Navigating USA Jobs, and we'll go over those resources a little bit later. Where in this webinar we walk you through the process step by step, so that you're better equipped to navigate USA Jobs. Okay, we go on to the next slide. All right. So the federal government offers many hiring paths to recruit and to hire from for different groups of people. For example, there are hiring paths for veterans, hiring paths for Peace Corps and VISTA alumni, military spouses, students and recent graduates, which is the Pathways Hiring Authority, and individuals with disabilities. There are also opportunities open to all U.S. citizens, and job seekers will be able to identify their eligibility and search for all opportunities available. You can see the image here has kind of the icons and brief descriptions, on what those hiring paths are. So these hiring authorities were established by law and executive order and identify certain categories of individuals eligible for federal jobs. So we encourage you to review the chart within USA Jobs and learn more about each eligibility and determine which are applicable to you. And if you're not deemed eligible for the hiring path you apply under, then you might be marked ineligible and your application will not be considered. We were just at a hiring event last week where a lot of folks came up to us saying that they said that they were ineligible. They were deemed as ineligible and they weren't referred. And a lot of people don't understand the difference between being qualified and eligible. So the position was maybe open to current federal employees, veterans, other special authorities, and they might not have fallen under that specific hiring path. So that's why they were deemed ineligible. Not that they weren't qualified for the job. They may have been well qualified for the job, but they just weren't eligible to apply. Okay, if we go on to the next slide. Okay, so we did have some questions that we have throughout the presentation. So if now we'll go through it. So where can you find the hiring authority info within USA Jobs announcement? There's a few options here. So A, the overview section. B, the this job is open to section. C, the required documents section, or D, all of the above. So if you want, you can go ahead and place your answers into the chat now, and I'll give the correct answer on the next slide. So why are our hiring authorities important? Understanding what hiring authorities you may be eligible for will help you to determine which jobs you may apply to and what documents and requirements might be needed for that application. You can apply to any job. However, you may not be found eligible if you don't show that you meet the requirements for the advertised hiring path or authority. Another thing that folks think is that these applications are scanned by computer, but it's actually, people that are going through and reviewing each application. And so if you don't submit the right documentation, or if your documentation is ineligible, then they have to disqualify that applicant, and they can't reach out to the applicant again to get that correct information. Once they're disqualified for that position, then they're disqualified for the position once the closing date happens. Okay, on to the next slide. All right, so the answer to the previous question is B. So if you answered B, then you are correct. So here we're talking about the hiring authority information. So listed in the "This job is open to" section of the job announcement is where you will find the listing of approved hiring authorities being utilized to fill those identified positions. So you should click on each hiring authority to learn more about them so you can determine if you meet the requirements for that position. You can also find more information in the clarification from the agency section of the job announcement. Next slide. Okay. Be sure to choose the hiring paths that are applicable to you within USA Jobs profile when setting up for the first time. Don't forget to update them if your situation changes, and you'll find that your hiring paths also change. So if you're a student or recent grad, or if you are a military veteran, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, next slide. Okay, there are multiple ways to search for jobs using various criteria, such as location, department, agency, pay, work schedule, and others. Additionally, you can search for available job opportunities based on the hiring path. On the right, you see on the USA Jobs search screen, as shown above, we are searching for positions that are open to the public and also open to veterans. Next slide. Okay. Once you have narrowed the filters and the preferences for your job search, including searching on the hiring path, you may save this search. The system will email you automatically when opportunities pop into USA Jobs that meet that search criteria. So this feature saves you from having to perform searches manually in USA Jobs every day. and the notification frequency can be tailored to your needs, as well as can be set to daily, weekly, or even monthly. Another option is to save the job. Sorry, by doing this, you can review opportunities before the closing date and ensure you get your application submitted prior to that deadline. Now we can discuss some of the more common hiring paths or eligibilities used by the Forest Service. Okay, next slide. All right, open to the public. For positions advertised as open to the public, you're eligible if you are a U.S. citizen or national. Anyone, including current federal employees, can apply to these jobs, but if you're a current federal employee and you apply to an open to the public job, you'll have to compete against the general public, and your status as a federal employee does not guarantee you'll get that job. So depending on the position, you may need to provide several different documents with your application. The required documents section in the job announcement will list all the required application materials that you must submit with your application package. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so the Veterans Hiring Authority. So veterans encompass a large portion of the federal government, and as such, certain preferences are given to the veterans to assist with an easier transaction back into civilian life. With veterans preference, you may receive preference over a non-veteran applicant in the hiring process. Veterans preference can be used when applying to permanent and temporary positions in both the competitive and accepted service of the executive branch. So there are three types of veterans preferences: disabled, 10-point preference eligible, non-disabled, 5-point preference eligible, and sole survivorship, so 0-point preference eligible. When claiming veterans preference, you must provide a copy of your DD 214 certificate of release or discharge from active duty, or other acceptable documentation. Applicants claiming 10-point preference will need to submit Form SF-15 or other acceptable documentation. You can upload and save documents to your USA Jobs account. Once uploaded, though, you can submit these forms with your application as needed. If you're a veteran, you may also be eligible for one of these special hiring authorities: Veterans Recruitment Appointment, or VRA, 30% or more disabled veteran, Veterans Employment Opportunity Act of 1998, or also known as VOA, and disabled veterans enrolled in a VA training program. For more information on this, please visit the USA Jobs website. Okay, next slide. All right, now going over the Veterans Employment Opportunities Act of 1998, or VOA. It provides preference eligible and certain other eligible veterans the opportunity to compete for certain positions announced under the agency's merit promotion procedures. It applies only when the agency is filling a permanent competitive service position and has decided to solicit candidates from outside its own workforce. It allows eligible veterans and preference eligibles to apply to announcements that would otherwise be open to so-called status candidates, which are current competitive service employees and certain prior employees who have earned competitive status. In order to be considered potentially eligible for a VO appointment, your latest discharge must be issued under honorable conditions, which means an honorable or general discharge, and you must be either a preference eligible or a veteran who substantially completed 3 or more years of active service under honorable conditions. Okay, next slide. All right, the military spouses. So as we accommodate the many veterans who volunteer to serve their country, we show the same appreciation for their spouses. Certain hiring paths and authorities are open to military spouses as well. And so if you're a military spouse, you may be eligible to apply using non-competitive process designed to help you get a job with federal government. Federal agencies can use the military spouse non-competitive hiring process to fill positions on either a temporary or permanent basis. You must meet certain criteria for each of these eligibility categories, to include a spouse of an active duty member of the armed forces, a spouse of a service member who is 100% disabled due to service-connected injury, a spouse of a service member killed while on active duty. However, keep in mind you are no longer eligible if you remarry. The documents that you may need include a marriage certificate, a copy of your spouse's active duty orders, a DD-214 certificate release or discharge from active duty, or a DD-1300 report of casualty. Okay, next slide. Okay, now we have another question for you. How many paths are available under the Pathways program? So A2, B3 paths, C6 paths, or D7? You can place your answers in the chat and we will give the correct answer on the next slide. Now we'll go over the Peace Corps Vista AmeriCorps, the Peace Corps AmeriCorps Vista. So if you serve with the Peace Corps or AmeriCorps Vista, which stands for Volunteers in Service to America, as a volunteer or volunteer leader, you may qualify for non-competitive eligibility. You're eligible if your service as a volunteer or volunteer leader totals at least 1 year with the Peace Corps or 1 year of service with AmeriCorps Vista. Your non-competitive eligibility lasts 1 year after completing your Peace Corps or AmeriCorps service. Federal agencies may extend the period for up to 3 years. If, after you completed your service, you are in the military service, studying at a recognized institution of higher learning, involved in another activity which, in the agency's view, warrants an extension. Also, your non-competitive eligibility does not entitle you to a job within the federal government. You must still apply and meet qualification standards and additional requirements such as background investigation. When applying for a job, include your Peace Corps or AmeriCorps Vista certification of service documents with your application and make sure to mention your non-competitive eligibility status on your resume. Okay, so going back to the Pathways program question. So the Pathways program offers the federal internship and employment opportunities for current students, recent graduates, and those with an advanced degree. So if you answered B to the last question, you are correct. So there are 3 different paths available. We'll go over these now. So the internship program is for current students. So if you're a current student in high school, college, trade school, or other qualifying educational institution, you may be eligible. This program offers paid opportunities to work in federal agencies and explore federal careers while completing your education. A lot of people think these internships might not be paid, but all the internships for this program are paid. The recent graduate program is for those who have graduated within the past 2 years from a qualifying educational institution or certificate program. The recent graduate program offers career development with training and mentorship. You must apply within 2 years of getting your degree or certificate, and veterans may have up to 6 years to apply if their initial 2-year period was interrupted due to military service obligations. Applicants who are due to graduate within the next 9 months from the job announcement closing date are also considered recent graduates and may apply under the hiring authority. And the third one, the Presidential Management Fellows or PMF program, is for recent graduates with an advanced degree, either a professional or graduate degree, such as a master's, PhD, or JD. You may be eligible if you are a current graduate student and will complete all of your advanced degree requirements to include completion or successful defense of any required thesis or dissertation by August 31st of the following year of the annual application, or if you have completed an advanced degree from a qualifying educational institution or program within the past 2 years of the annual application opening date. Okay. The next hiring path is Schedule A, and that refers to special hiring authority that gives, oh, I'm sorry, and if you can go to the individuals with disabilities, perfect. Okay. So as I was mentioning, Schedule A refers to the special hiring authority that gives federal agencies an optional and potentially quicker way to hire individuals with disabilities. You can apply for jobs using Schedule A if you are a person with an intellectual, severe physical, or psychiatric disability. The Forest Service does not determine who is eligible for Schedule A. To be eligible for Schedule A, you must provide a proof of disability letter stating that you have an intellectual or severe physical or psychiatric disability. You can get the letter from your doctor, a licensed medical professional, a licensed vocational rehabilitation specialist, or any federal, state, or local agency that issues or provides disability benefits. Applying using Schedule A can be a great way to get a federal job, but it is only one of many opportunities that may be available, and you still must compete with other eligible applicants. Federal agencies hire people using many options, so applying under Schedule A does not guarantee you a job. Tips for applying under Schedule A include mention your eligibility and that you want to be considered for Schedule A on your resume and in your cover letter if you use one. If you are eligible for Schedule A, go to USA Jobs, to your USA Jobs profile and select Individuals with Disabilities hiring path and make your resume searchable. If your resume is searchable, agencies who are looking for people eligible under Schedule A may be able to find you. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. All right, individuals with disabilities. The Selective Placement Program Coordinator, or SPCC, helps agencies recruit, hire, and accommodate people with disabilities. The SPPC can guide you through the application process and answer questions. Most federal agencies, but not all, have an SPPC or equivalent role, such as a Special Emphasis Program Manager. If you are a person with a disability and interested in a job opportunity, contact the agency's SPCC using the Selective Placement Program Coordinator directory available on the USA Jobs website. And for our agency, it is Sean Tillman. So if anybody is interested in his email, we can put it in the chat here in a bit. Also, federal agencies are required by law to provide reasonable accommodations to qualified applicants and employees with disabilities, unless doing so will result in undue hardship to the agency. The accommodations make it easier for an employee with a disability to successfully perform the duties of the position. For example, an agency may offer interpreters, readers, or other personal assistants, modified position duties, flexible work schedules or work sites, and accessible technology or other workplace adaptive equipment. You can also request reasonable accommodations at any time during the hiring process or at any time while on the job. Requests are considered on a case-by-case basis. To request a reasonable accommodation, look at the job posting for instructions on requesting reasonable accommodation. Work directly with the person arranging the interviews. Contact the agency's SPPC and request a reasonable accommodation verbally or in writing. No special language is needed. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, a direct hiring authority, or also known as DHA, is a hiring authority that the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, can give to executive agencies with delegated examining authority for filling vacancies when a critical hiring need or severe shortage of candidates exists. For example, the Forest Service is often in need of wildland firefighters. Therefore, we may utilize the DHA to fill those vacancies. The authority allows an agency to hire after public notice is given and any qualified applicant, and expedites hiring by eliminating competitive rating and ranking such as veterans preference. The image you see here is an example of verbiage an agency may include in their job announcements when utilizing the DHA. Applicants must meet all requirements of the position they are applying to, including qualifications, experience, education, and licensure or certification if need be. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and we'll go over the Public Land Corps. I know that Sylvia will go over the Resource Assistance Program in tomorrow's portion, but we'll go over the Public Land Corps today. So Public Land Corps is a hiring authority the Forest Service utilizes to fill positions under merit promotion procedures and will not be found specifically within USA Jobs as it falls under the General Special Authority Hiring Authority, PAT. It is a non-competitive hiring authority for permanent general schedule or GS or wage grade WG positions, and candidates that complete the PLC program and hold a certification of completion can then apply under the hiring authority for permanent positions with the Forest Service. Okay, next slide. So eligibility for Public Land Corps. Once a Public Land Corps participant completes their program requirements, they are granted the option to apply to internal merit announcements for permanent positions. This authority cannot be used when applying for temporary or term positions. So you must be eligible and qualify under these certain conditions. So you must be a U.S. citizen between the ages of 16 to 30 years of age. You have successfully completed a Public Land Corps project that includes 640 hours of work on a conservation project, which includes 120 hours on a Forest Service project. The Public Land Corps certificate of eligibility must be signed by the designated official before the PLC member turns 31 years old. On the slide, you can see an example of that PLC certificate. The non-competitive hiring eligibility status with the PLC authority cannot exceed more than 2 years after completion of Public Land Corps service. Non-public, they are granted a filing privilege to apply under internal merit procedures, and they must be onboarded before the age of 33. Veterans preference is applicable amongst PLC candidates that are referred. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so federal employees hiring path. Being a federal employee doesn't mean you're eligible for every federal job, so it's important to understand which service you belong to and the appointment type you are serving on. Understanding this will help you know which jobs you are eligible for and prevent you from spending time on jobs which you are not eligible for. Services are how the federal government describes categories for jobs that provide different options and benefits to the future employee. There are 3 categories of service in the federal government. Those are competitive service, accepted service, and senior executive service, or SES. Okay, we'll go over those categories on the next slide. Okay, so competitive service includes positions with agencies that follow the U.S. Office of Personnel Management hiring rules and pay scales. The accepted service includes positions with agencies that have their own hiring rules, pay scales, and evaluation criteria. And the senior executive service includes managerial, supervisory, made up my own word, and policy positions classified above general schedule grade 15 or equivalent positions in most executive branch agencies. On this slide, you can see the terms of eligibility to apply for merit promotion jobs. And this falls under the competitive service, which some exceptions under the accepted service. We will define merit promotion on the next slide. Okay, so merit promotion lets a current or former federal employee apply for a job without having to compete with the general public or people with veterans preference. Instead, they compete with other competitive service employees. Veterans who are VOA eligible may apply to these jobs, but veterans preference does not apply to the merit promotion positions. Some federal jobs are only available to current employees of a specific agency. Internal to an agency jobs can be in all 3 services. If you are in a competitive service, you may be eligible to transfer to another position in the competitive service. So former federal employees previously in the competitive service may be eligible for career transition or reinstatement. If your job agency or department was eliminated, you may be eligible to receive selection priority over other applicants, leading to career transition. If you were in the competitive service, you may be eligible to return to the federal government under the reinstatement program. Okay, next slide, please. All right. LMWFA, or the Land Management Workforce Flexibility Act. This hiring authority is open to current and former temporary and term employees of certain federal land management agencies who meet eligibility requirements. They can apply for permanent positions announced under the merit promotion procedures, and applicants may not use this authority to apply to temporary or term positions. Applicants eligible under the authority may apply to job announcements at any agency that are open government-wide. So if the job announcement is open Forest Service-wide, only those with Forest Service experience can apply under LMWFA. So please ensure you review the job announcement to understand those specific requirements. The authority does not provide any preference or priority in hiring. It gives temporary employees an opportunity not previously available to apply for positions like other federal employees when the job is announced to an agency's own workforce internal to the agency. Applicants must apply and be deemed best qualified to be referred for consideration. Okay, now we'll go over the requirements, the eligibility requirements on the next slide. Okay, to be eligible under LMWFA, applicants must have been initially appointed under the competitive procedures for Forest Service. The initial appointment must have been made under the Demonstration Project Authority, or DEMO, pretty much open to the public. Initial appointment cannot have been non-competitive, such as Veterans Recruitment Authority or Schedule A. And you must have more than 24 months of service under time-limited appointment or appointments in one or a combination of land management agencies, and not have had a break for more than 2 years. Also have had acceptable performance for all periods of service covered in the more than 24 months. And additionally, the most recent separation must have been for reasons other than performance or misconduct. Okay. Before we, if we can go to the next slide. All right, so before we go into the required documents for LMWFA, I have one more question. So true or false regarding qualifications? KSA stands for knowledge, skills, and abilities. Just place your answers in the chat and then we'll have the correct answer on the next slide. So start collecting documents that you need to prove LMWFA eligibility to apply. They will be required for every position and apply to under this hiring authority. The SF-50 notification of personnel action form is a very important document, and it is your written documentation that affects your position or pay. As a LMWFA applicant, it is your responsibility to contact your agency to collect the necessary documents required as proof of your more than 24 months of service. The job announcement for which you apply will have specific instructions in the required documents section. The performance documentation is also required for each period of the more than 24 months of service. An official form or letter from the supervisor describing the work, your performance, and exact dates of the service period may also be accepted. So if you cannot obtain these, you are required to provide a stated reason as to why the appraisal or documentation is not available, and a statement that your performance for the periods worked at an acceptable level, your most recent separation was for reasons other than misconduct or performance, and you were never notified that you were not eligible for rehire based on performance. Many LMWFA candidates were hired previously under time-limited competitive appointments. These appointments are either temporary, such as 1039 appointments, or term appointments. Only competitive service appointments count towards LMWFA eligibility, and accepted service temporary appointments are not creditable. The service type will be shown on your SF-50. Some additional information on the LMWFA hiring authority includes selectees are given career or career conditional appointments. Applicants hired under this hiring authority are not required to serve as probationary period. And lastly, there are no limitations on grade levels or occupational series. Okay, next slide. Okay, what are qualification standards? Once you determine which hiring authority you are eligible to apply under, you'll need to determine if you meet the qualification standards of each position and if you are interested in applying for it. Qualification standards are a description of the minimum requirements necessary to perform work of a particular occupation successfully. These minimum requirements may include specific general and specialized experience as well as education. They are not designed to rank candidates, identify the best qualified for a particular position, or substitute for an analysis of an applicant's knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies. If you answer true to the question in the previous slide, then you are correct. KSA stand for knowledge, skills, and abilities. Okay, next slide. Now that we have defined the qualification standards, we'll discuss why understanding and addressing these standards is so important. It's highly recommended that you review the entire job announcement to understand all aspects of the position and its expectations, including the qualification requirements. You must meet the qualifications for the series and grade as outlined in the job announcement in order to be considered for the position. Your application and resume must clearly show that you possess the experience required to be general or specialized. Transcripts must be provided for qualifications if the position has a education requirement. In some instances, providing course descriptions could be necessary to ensure certain courses count towards the requirement. Okay, experience and education. So qualification standards often include experience and education requirements. Experience refers to the paid and unpaid experience, including volunteer work done through national service programs such as Peace Corps, AmeriCorps Vista, and other organizations such as professional, religious, community student, or social. Volunteer work helps build critical competencies, knowledge, and skills that can provide valuable training and experience that translate directly to paid employment. You will receive credit for all qualifying experience, including volunteer experience. General experience is progressively responsible clerical office field or other type of experience that shows that you could perform the duties of the job being filled. Specialized experience is defined as experience in or related to the duties of the position being filled that equip the applicant with the particular competencies or KSAs to successfully perform the duties of the position. Some qualification standards have specific educational, licensure, or certification requirements that may apply only to specific positions in an occupational series. This may include specific amounts of education that have been completed, usually a specified number of semester hours, as well as specific types of degrees or coursework. As previously discussed, your resume, application, and documents you upload must show that you meet the experience and education requirements of any of the positions which you apply to. Okay, next slide. Okay, and next slide. Perfect. Sometimes we get questions from applicants about employment suitability. And the Forest Service suitability is reviewed only after an applicant is selected for a position and provided a tentative job offer by an HR staffer. Should you accept a tentative job offer, you will be asked to complete an OF 306 form. This form is the Declaration of Federal Employment among other pre-employment requirements. On that form, as shown on this slide, you will need to include your full name, social security number, place of birth, U.S. citizenship status, date of birth, selective service registration, military service, and finally answer some specific questions. Here are some of the examples of the questions. During the last 7 years, have you been convicted, been imprisoned, been on probation, or been on parole? Are you currently under any charges for any violation of the law? Are you delinquent on any federal debt? Do any of your relatives work for the agency or government organization for which you are submitting this form? These are some questions, and they are that would be on that OF 306. They're listed as 9 through 16 on that OF 306 form, and the circumstances for each event you list will be considered. And in many cases, you can still be considered suitable for federal positions. Your HR staffer will review your completed OF306 form to determine if you are suitable for federal employment, and depending on how you answer those questions, 9 through 16, your form may be forwarded to a suitability specialist for further review and final determination. You'll be notified by an HR staffer should you be deemed unsuitable for the position and provided the specific information on why that determination was made, at which time the job offer will be rescinded. That is why job offers are tentative at this point. So you would not be provided with a confirmed offer until after you clear all pre-employment requirements. Okay. That pretty much concludes it, but as you may know, the Forest Service is organized by regions. The map here gives a visual representation of all our regional locations, and each region varies in climate, geography, and types of work that occur. For more information, visit the Forest Service on our webpage, and here in a moment, we'll have Jody go over some of those resources with you. Okay, Jody, if you have that side up, we can pull it up.
Actually, Ali, I'm gonna do this part tomorrow because we ran out of time and they're gonna be doing their closeout now.
Okay.
So I
perfect.
do apologize. So what I'm gonna turn it over to Lisa so she
Perfect.
can do her closeout, and then I'll just incorporate this into my part tomorrow.
Sounds like a plan. Well, thank you all. And I don't know if there's
Thank you.
time for questions or if Lisa, you just want to take over from here. We'll jet on out.
That's fine. If anybody does have any questions, I'll give you a few seconds to put those up if needed. Well, if not, thank you so much for your presentation.
Of course, it was a pleasure.
Thank you. All right, so I did introduce myself at the start of the program, but I'll do it again for those who have joined us since the start of the session. How patu washte mitaupiapi chante washte nape chiuzapi Lisa Yellow Lugar amachiapi. Good afternoon, my relatives. I greet you with a good heart and a handshake. My name is Lisa Yellow Lugar. I am a tribal liaison with the USDA Office of Partnership and Public Engagement. I work with the 1994 program, which you heard from earlier today, and our nation's 1994 tribal colleges and universities. I'm stationed at Sitting Bull College in Fort Yates, North Dakota on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. As a liaison, I work to directly recruit students for the 1994 Tribal Scholars Program, but also serve as a communication resource to connect USDA agencies with 1994 tribal colleges and universities and the tribal communities they support. If you have any questions, please feel free to connect with me. I've put my contact information in the chat a couple of times, as well as a link to the 1994 program webpage. I want to thank today's speakers and participants for taking time out of your busy schedules to learn and grow as a community. The purpose of this workshop is to provide an opportunity to connect the Forest Service with those Indigenous communities. And I think we're off to a good start. We heard inspiring words on implementing traditional knowledge and expertise for intertribal agreements and plans for renewed engagement from U.S. Forest Service leadership, Tina Terrell. We learned about the many scholarship and internship pathways and career development opportunities available to students through USDA tribal higher education initiatives and our very vital partner organizations, as well as examples of the great research work being conducted by student interns on important topics like food sovereignty, traditional foods and medicines, sacred sites, and tribal ecological knowledge. We listened to a great presentation from the Forest Service Office of Tribal Relations and got firsthand knowledge about what it's like to be an Indigenous employee working for the Forest Service and the important role they play in caring for our nation's forests and grasslands. It was so interesting to hear all the different ways in which they made their way to the USDA. Telling their story, getting their advice, and learning from their experiences will be so beneficial for interested students. And finally, we learned about the potential pathways, hiring authorities, and eligibility requirements for entry into the agency, creating federal resumes, accessing USA jobs, and program coordinators, and more. It was a lot of information to get in one day, but as Latasha mentioned, and you may have noticed, the session is being recorded and will be provided to participants along with any resource materials. If there was something that piqued your interest, please reach out to any of today's speakers on the opportunities you've heard throughout the session. To close out the day, we invite students and participants to visit any and all of the website links provided during today's session to learn more about internship, scholarship, and other great programs for youth. This concludes today's session for the Indigenous Youth Career Engagement webinar. Please join us tomorrow for an additional day of presentations to learn more about the opportunities to engage and empower the next generation of Indigenous leaders. Wopila Ichichiapi, Dokshahi Haniki. Thank you.